Imagine waking up one sunny morning, coffee in hand, thinking today will be just like any other. The kids are off to school. Work awaits, and life feels predictable. Kevin Mangle, a devoted husband and loving father, lived a life much like this. From the outside, he seemed to have it all: a stable career, a beautiful home, and a family that brought him immense joy. But sometimes, the calmest waters hide the deepest storms, and Kevin's seemingly perfect life was about to be shaken in ways he could never imagine. Kevin met Morgan Wixon in 1997. At first, she seemed like the missing piece in his life. Affectionate, charming, and appearing deeply caring, Morgan quickly became the woman Kevin believed he was destined to spend his life with. Their connection felt natural, almost magical. And Kevin, eager to build the life he had always dreamed of, embraced this new chapter with open arms. They married, had children, and together started a landscaping business that symbolized not just their partnership, but their shared dreams. To friends and neighbors, the Mengel family appeared ideal. Kevin was the kind of man who worked tirelessly to provide, who celebrated every small victory of his children, and who cherished family above all else. Morgan, on the surface, seemed equally invested in this vision of domestic bliss, but as time passed, subtle signs began to appear, moments that hinted that all was not as perfect as it seemed. Small lies, unexplained absences, and curious interactions raised questions. Yet Kevin, trusting and hopeful, overlooked these red flags, believing love could overcome imperfections. Life has a way of teaching lessons in the most unexpected ways. Kevin's trust in those closest to him, his dedication to family, and his belief in love set the stage for a story that would unfold with shocking twists. Behind the scenes, Morgan's behavior hinted at a hidden world of manipulation, secrets, and personal desires that threatened the very foundation of Kevin's life. As we explore this story today, you will see how trust can be exploited, how appearances can deceive, and how one person's choices can ripple across the lives of everyone around them. It is a chilling reminder that even the most devoted, careful individuals can be blindsided by betrayal when they least expect it. Before we dive deeper into this shocking tale, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications so you do not miss any of our thrilling true crime stories and gripping mysteries from around the world. Every story we share is a journey into the unexpected, and you will want to be here for every twist, every revelation, and every lesson. Now, let us take a closer look at Kevin and Morgan's story, a tale of love, deception, and the dark consequences of choices made behind closed doors. Kevin Mangle's childhood was marked by both warmth and disruption, a combination that would shape the man he became and the choices he made in his adult life. Born into a family that, on the surface, seemed close-knit and supportive, Kevin experienced the kind of love and guidance that most children long for. His parents, though eventually divorced, had always emphasized the importance of family bonds. Celebrating birthdays, holidays, and simple everyday moments with genuine care. Kevin had siblings, Christopher and Michelle, with whom he shared laughter, secrets, and the small but significant milestones of growing up together. And these relationships became a cornerstone of his understanding of trust and loyalty. Yet even in the midst of this closeness, the shadow of change loomed, and by the time he reached his teenage years, the family dynamic shifted as his parents amicably parted ways and moved into new relationships. Though the divorce itself was conducted with civility and no overt hostility, the subtle fractures it introduced into Kevin's understanding of stability and permanence could not be ignored, and he began to internalize a quiet, unwavering commitment to creating a life for himself that could withstand such disruptions. Kevin's upbringing instilled in him not only a sense of responsibility but also a deep yearning for continuity, a need to preserve the family unit that had once been so whole in his eyes. Every decision he made, from his academic pursuits to his career choices, seemed to reflect a careful desire to build a secure foundation, not only for himself but for those he loved. Friends and teachers often remarked on his reliability, his measured demeanor, and his natural inclination to mediate conflict or soothe tension when disagreements arose. This combination of compassion, ambition, and a deeply ingrained respect for family ties defined Kevin in his formative years, making him someone who not only valued relationships but actively nurtured them. Believing that even when circumstances were difficult, the bonds he formed could endure, Morgan Wixon's story unfolded quite differently, shaped by turbulence and the complexities of a youth fraught with challenges. Born in Pennsylvania as well, she entered the world with an energy and intensity that would manifest in ways both captivating and troubling. Morgan's adolescence was punctuated by rebellion and defiance, a series of choices that often put her at odds with her parents' expectations and authority. Whereas Kevin's environment had offered structure and a sense of predictability, Morgan encountered a landscape of instability, one in which her impulses, desires, and frustrations sometimes collided with the guidance she received. Friends and acquaintances would later describe her as charismatic and intelligent, yet simultaneously unpredictable, someone capable of charm and persuasion that drew others in even as it left them uncertain about her true motives. Her family relationships were strained, marked by tension and occasional estrangement, leaving her with a complex mixture of resilience, self-reliance, and, at times, a tendency to manipulate situations to her advantage. These early experiences, though not fully documented in public records, provide glimpses into the patterns of behavior that would later play a critical role in the unfolding tragedy surrounding Kevin. When Kevin and Morgan crossed paths in the late 1990s, the contrast between their backgrounds could not have been more pronounced. Yet there was an undeniable chemistry that drew them together. Kevin, with his carefully constructed sense of stability and his deep respect for loyalty, saw in Morgan a spark of vitality and passion that promised to complement his measured nature. Morgan, in turn, recognized in Kevin someone steady, reliable, and seemingly unshakable, a partner who could anchor her, at least temporarily, amidst the turbulence of her own life. Initially, the relationship appeared harmonious, with each bringing qualities to the partnership that seemed to balance the other. They fell in love quickly, as though their contrasting backgrounds had created a magnetic pull, drawing them into a shared dream of family, success, and domestic bliss. Yet beneath the surface, the very differences that had initially made their connection intriguing would begin to sow tension. Kevin's emphasis on stability and unity, honed through years of observing the fragility of familial bonds, sometimes clashed with Morgan's independent streak and her history of testing boundaries. Early signs of deception, subtle lies, and occasional secrecy began to emerge. Though Kevin, guided by both hope and his instinctive trust in the people he loved, often overlooked them or rationalized them in the context of Morgan's complicated past. As time progressed, the stakes of these differences became higher, while Kevin continued to invest wholeheartedly in building a life that reflected his ideals of family and loyalty. Morgan's actions increasingly reflected personal ambitions, desires, and influences that extended beyond the partnership they had ostensibly formed. Understanding Kevin's upbringing and Morgan's early life provides essential insight into the unfolding drama. Kevin's devotion to family, shaped by the fractures of his own childhood and his commitment to stability, made him particularly vulnerable to betrayal, for he approached relationships with a degree of trust and hope that was both admirable and, tragically, exploitable. Morgan's past, with its patterns of rebellion, manipulation, and adaptive cunning, laid the groundwork for choices that would ultimately culminate in deception, infidelity, and the shocking events that would forever alter the lives of everyone involved. In this way, the story of Kevin and Morgan is not merely a tale of tragedy and betrayal. It is also a narrative deeply intertwined with the formative experiences that shaped who they were, what they valued, and how they would respond when trust was tested in ways neither could have anticipated. Through these intertwined histories, the audience begins to understand why Kevin's trust was both a strength and a vulnerability, and why Morgan's past could manifest in actions that would devastate the very life she had entered. The contrast between Kevin's desire for unity and Morgan's tendency toward manipulation creates a tension that is palpable from the earliest moments of their relationship, setting the stage for the twists, betrayals, and shocking outcomes that would define their story. By tracing their backgrounds carefully, it becomes clear that the roots of this tragedy extend far beyond a single act, revealing a complex interplay between upbringing, personality, and the choices that emerge when past patterns collide with present circumstances. As the years passed, the surface of Kevin and Morgan's life appeared polished and harmonious. Yet beneath that carefully maintained exterior, cracks were forming that would soon widen into chasms. Kevin remained the devoted husband and father he had always been, pouring his energy into the landscaping business they had built together and into providing for his children, while Morgan navigated the world with a different set of priorities, driven by impulses and desires that often eluded those around her. It was during this period that Steve Chappell, a young man 13 years her junior, entered the scene as an employee of Kevin's landscaping company. Eager to prove himself and earn his place within a professional environment he admired. At first, his presence seemed innocuous, even beneficial, as Kevin saw in him a capable worker with a willingness to learn, someone who could be trusted to take on responsibility and support the operations of a growing business. Morgan, however, perceived a different opportunity, recognizing in Steve a combination of youthful energy, malleable loyalty, and an openness to influence that she could exploit. The relationship between Morgan and Steve began subtly, almost innocently, masked by smiles and seemingly casual conversations that Kevin, in his trusting nature, had no reason to question. Morgan, skilled in the art of manipulation and attuned to the vulnerabilities of those around her, drew Steve in with attention, encouragement, and flattery, appealing to both his ambition and his desire for approval. To Steve, it may have initially felt like admiration and mentorship, yet the dynamic quickly evolved into something far more intimate. A carefully orchestrated emotional entanglement that positioned Morgan as both confidant and instigator. As the connection deepened, she leveraged it not only to fulfill her personal desires, but also to assert control over Kevin's world in subtle, imperceptible ways, embedding herself into Steve's thoughts and guiding his actions while maintaining the facade of a dutiful wife. Kevin, consumed with the responsibilities of running his business, caring for his children, and maintaining the stability he had fought to preserve throughout his life, remained largely unaware of the undercurrents swirling around him. He trusted Morgan implicitly, believing that the bond they had nurtured over more than a decade could withstand the pressures of everyday life, and that their shared history of building a family and a business was a foundation too strong to be undermined. This trust, coupled with Kevin's innate optimism and commitment to seeing the best in people, blinded him to the subtle signs of Morgan's shifting loyalties. He noticed little more than occasional absences or unexplained behaviors, which he often rationalized as normal stresses of adult life, unaware that the threads of betrayal were weaving themselves into a tapestry of deception with consequences he could not yet imagine. Meanwhile, Morgan's influence over Steve grew, shaped by a mixture of emotional manipulation, promises of attention, and the strategic framing of Kevin as a figure whose authority could be circumvented without immediate consequence. She cultivated in him a sense of partnership, a shared secret that created a bond between them, while carefully maintaining the illusion of propriety in front of Kevin and the rest of the family. The tension in this triangle of relationships was subtle at first, hidden in glances, private conversations, and small actions that carried hidden meanings only Morgan and Steve fully understood. As Kevin continued to devote himself to the family and the business, unaware that an intricate web of manipulation was forming around him, Morgan's influence solidified, laying the groundwork for choices that would ultimately shatter the life he had so carefully built. This covert relationship did more than provide Morgan with companionship. It became a mechanism for asserting power and control, a way to test limits and manipulate circumstances without immediate detection. Each interaction with Steve was carefully calibrated, designed to elicit loyalty and compliance while reinforcing Morgan's own objectives, creating a partnership that was both emotionally charged and strategically advantageous. Kevin's absence from the inner workings of this dynamic allowed it to grow unchecked, a silent escalation of trust misplaced and intentions concealed, transforming a seemingly ordinary workplace interaction into a catalyst for betrayal and eventual catastrophe. As the days and months passed, Morgan's secretive liaison with Steve began to influence the patterns of everyday life in ways that were difficult for outsiders to discern but profoundly impactful for those intimately involved. Decisions about business operations, the distribution of responsibilities, and even casual household interactions became subtly colored by the unseen influence of this affair. Kevin, committed to his vision of a stable family and focused on the tangible aspects of his life, remained oblivious. Yet each passing day brought the undercurrents of deceit closer to a tipping point. The trust he had invested in both Morgan and Steve, born from years of collaboration and familial devotion, became the very vulnerability that would ultimately expose him to harm, illustrating how the dynamics of manipulation and emotional influence can silently, invisibly, shape outcomes in ways that are impossible to predict until the consequences unfold. This phase of the story, marked by secret meetings, whispered promises, and the subtle orchestration of loyalty and desire, highlights not only the capacity for deception within personal relationships, but also the danger of unrecognized manipulation. It underscores how even individuals with the best intentions, the strongest values, and the deepest commitments can be blindsided when others act with cunning and ambition hidden behind a veneer of normalcy. The relationships between Kevin, Morgan, and Steve, initially seeming benign and structured, ultimately became a complex interplay of trust, betrayal, and emotional control, setting the stage for events that would transform the Mangle family's life forever, leaving a legacy of tragedy, reflection, and the profound consequences of hidden motives. By the summer of 2010, the intricate web that Morgan had woven around Steve and Kevin had reached a dangerous and irreversible point. What had begun as subtle manipulation, a secret affair hidden behind the facade of a happy family life, escalated into something far darker than anyone could have imagined. Kevin, still devoted and trusting, remained immersed in his daily routines, tending to his landscaping business, caring for his children, and attempting to maintain the stability and unity he had always cherished. Yet around him, unseen forces were at work, orchestrated with a chilling precision that blended desire, greed, and an alarming disregard for the life at the center of it all. Morgan, having nurtured Steve's infatuation and carefully guided his actions, recognized an opportunity to reshape her life completely, and she began to push the boundaries of what Steve was willing to do in service of their secret ambitions. It started with a plan so calculated that it seemed almost surreal in its cold pragmatism. Morgan and Steve agreed to use nicotine, potent substance, to incapacitate Kevin. Steve, following Morgan's direction, spent hours preparing a solution, carefully researching its lethal potential, and devising a way to introduce it without immediate detection. The plan required patience and precision, and both of them understood the stakes. One misstep could undo everything. The first attempt, subtle and almost invisible, involved Kevин's favorite iced tea, a beverage that he consumed without suspicion during the long hours he spent working in the yard. It was meant to be simple, almost elegant in its execution, a few drops of the poison mixed into his drink. A seemingly ordinary day that would end with the removal of an obstacle from Morgan's path and the creation of an opportunity for a new life with Steve. Yet the world has a way of introducing unpredictability even into the most carefully orchestrated schemes. Kevin, unsuspecting and fully engaged in his work, drank the tea but showed no immediate signs of distress. His body continued its usual rhythm, the sound of the hedge trimmer, the movement of soil, and the laughter of his children nearby blending into the ordinary cadence of a summer morning. Morgan and Steve watched, frustrated and alarmed, realizing that their initial plan had failed. The poison had not achieved its intended effect, and the clock was ticking. Decisions had to be made quickly, and hesitation could ruin everything. It was in this moment of failure that the true depth of their complicity and resolve became apparent, and the plan escalated from a calculated attempt at surreptitious harm to a direct, violent action that would leave no room for error or redemption. Steve, under Morgan's guidance and increasingly compelled by both fear and desire to secure their shared objectives, retrieved a shovel and approached Kevin while he worked, unsuspecting and immersed in the routine of his day. The first strike landed with shocking force, a jarring disruption in the quiet of the yard, but it was insufficient to achieve the outcome they sought. Undeterred, Steve continued, guided by Morgan's instructions and her unwavering presence beside him, directing the pace and method of the attack with a calculated calm that betrayed the severity of what was occurring. Kevin's life, built on years of careful planning, love, and dedication, ended in a moment of sudden violence. A tragic collapse that left the foundation of his family and business in immediate jeopardy. Even in the aftermath, Morgan's orchestration did not waver. The cover-up was meticulous, reflecting the same strategic foresight she had applied in manipulating relationships and guiding Steve. Together, they concealed the body, wrapping it in a tarp and transporting it to an abandoned section of the landscaping property, ensuring that evidence of the crime was obscured from discovery. Their actions were methodical, reflecting an unsettling combination of emotional detachment and practical concern for the consequences of exposure. The process of hiding Kevin's presence was not merely reactive. It was an extension of the control Morgan had cultivated over Steve and the environment around her. A testament to the length she was willing to go to achieve her objectives and manipulate the narrative of their lives. During this time, technology and communication, usually tools of connection, were employed as instruments of deception. Morgan used Kevin's phone to send messages to his family and friends, crafting the illusion that he was alive and simply taking time away from work and home responsibilities. Each text, each brief, was designed to reinforce a narrative absence rather than violence, maintaining the facade of normalcy even as the truth remained buried, both literally and figuratively. Meanwhile, Steve's role, dictated by Morgan's influence and the shared secrecy of their actions, exemplified how manipulation and emotional leverage can compel individuals to participate in deeds they might never have conceived independently, highlighting a disturbing interplay of power, persuasion, and moral compromise. This combination of premeditation, action, and post-event deception underscores the chilling reality of what can happen when trust is exploited and ambition is divorced from conscience. Kevin's devotion to family and his reliance on those closest to him, once sources of strength and stability, became vulnerabilities in a world where manipulation and secrecy had taken root. Morgan's complicity. Her strategic orchestration of both the crime and the subsequent cover-up illustrates the extent to which calculated influence can shape outcomes, steering individuals toward paths of irreversible consequence, while preserving the illusion of control and normalcy until the moment of revelation. The gravity of this event extends beyond the immediate act of violence. It illuminates the dynamics of betrayal, the capacity for human cunning when combined with emotional leverage, and the tragic consequences that arise when trust is weaponized. Kevin, unaware until the final moments, became the focal point of a convergence of ambition, desire, and manipulation. His fate sealed not by chance, but by the deliberate and coordinated actions of those he had believed he could trust most. The incident demonstrates not only the destructive potential of hidden motives, but also the fragile balance upon which relationships, families, and communities rest, revealing how quickly the ordinary can descend into tragedy when deception and intent collide with opportunity and trust. In the weeks and months that followed, the layers of planning and concealment would begin to unravel under the scrutiny of investigation. Phone records and painstaking analysis of interactions that had seemed mundane but were, in fact, crucial threads of evidence. Yet even in retrospect, the horrifying clarity of those hours, the poisoned tea, the strikes with the shovel, and the meticulous cover-up serves as a stark reminder of how ordinary life, once infiltrated by manipulation and betrayal, can be transformed into a narrative of shocking consequence, leaving a trail of grief, bewilderment, and questions about the limits of trust and the shadows that can exist behind familiar faces. Kevin's sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the lives of those who loved him, turning a once ordinary family routine into a tense, anxious waiting game fraught with unanswered questions and growing dread. At first, the idea that he might simply be taking time for himself seemed plausible to some, especially in light of the occasional stress and exhaustion inherent in running a business and raising children. Yet as days stretched into a week, and calls and messages went unanswered, Kevin's family began to sense that something far more serious had occurred. The unwavering reliability that had characterized his daily interactions, the consistency with which he checked in and maintained contact, suddenly gave way to silence, leaving his loved ones in a state of escalating fear. Concerned for his safety, Kevin's mother and siblings contacted the police, triggering a missing person investigation that would soon uncover layers of deception and premeditation far beyond anyone's initial imaginings. The investigators, skilled in interpreting the subtle cues that accompany sudden absences, immediately recognized that inconsistencies in the accounts they were receiving could be critical. Morgan, still outwardly composed, offered explanations that Kevin had stepped away temporarily, citing personal stress and the need for a break, supported by text messages sent from Kevin's own phone. On the surface, these communications appeared credible, reinforcing the illusion that Kevin had merely withdrawn to regain balance. Yet the investigators, trained to look beyond appearances and detect patterns in human behavior and digital evidence, noted anomalies. The language in the messages was unlike Kevin's usual style, brief and uncharacteristically curt, lacking the familiarity and warmth typical of his interactions. Small discrepancies, easily overlooked by friends or family, became pivotal clues in the unfolding investigation. Phone tracking, a technology that had become indispensable in modern investigations, soon revealed the convergence of Morgan and Steve's movements with Kevin's phone location, a discovery that added weight to suspicions that something more sinister had transpired. What initially appeared to be a voluntary disappearance was increasingly framed as an orchestrated attempt to conceal a crime. Each phone ping, each route traced through cell towers, painted a picture of calculated action, hinting at premeditation and collaboration rather than mere circumstance. The realization that Kevin's absence might be the result of foul play intensified the urgency of the investigation. mobilizing law enforcement resources and deepening the scrutiny on those closest to him. Under increasing pressure, Morgan's careful fade began to show cracks. The investigators, guided by both procedural expertise and intuition honed over years of experience, pursued every lead, cross-referencing witness statements, tracking communications, and examining financial and business records. The more they uncovered, the more the intricate planning of Kevin's murder and the subsequent cover-up came into focus. Messages between Morgan and Steve revealed not just an affair but an elaborate scheme, detailing intentions and actions that had unfolded in the days surrounding Kevin's disappearance. These texts, painstakingly analyzed by detectives, provided a chilling glimpse into the orchestration of events, capturing conversations that outlined the preparation of poisonous substances, the physical attack, and the methods devised to conceal the evidence of the crime. When confronted with the mounting evidence, Steve initially resisted, but the weight of the corroborated messages and the undeniable digital trail left little room for denial. The emotional strain and realization of the consequences of their actions ultimately led him to confess, recounting in detail the steps he and Morgan had taken, the motivations behind them, and the specific actions that resulted in Kevin's death. His testimony, critical to the investigation, offered a clear narrative of events, revealing how Morgan had manipulated him, guided his actions, and maintained control over the situation from start to finish. Through Steve's confession, the authorities could piece together not only the timeline of the crime, but also the extent of Morgan's involvement, including her role in planning, executing, and attempting to cover up the murder. Morgan herself, when interrogated, displayed a complex blend of composure and evasiveness. Yet the evidence gathered from the inconsistencies in her statements to the digital footprint of her communications with Steve made denial untenable. The investigators methodically presented the findings, confronting her with the unassailable trail of messages, phone locations, and corroborating witness accounts. Under this scrutiny, the carefully maintained narrative of Kevin taking time away from life dissolved, exposing the premeditated nature of the acts she had orchestrated. The confession of Steve, combined with the tangible proof, created a scenario in which accountability could no longer be avoided, and the full scope of the plan from the initial poison attempt to the fatal assault and the concealment of Kevin's body was laid bare. The unraveling of the case highlighted the crucial role of technology and meticulous investigative work in bringing hidden truths to light. Without the combination of digital tracking, analysis of communications, and careful observation of behavioral inconsistencies, the sophisticated layers of deception might have persisted far longer, leaving unanswered questions and unresolved grief. Yet through methodical effort, the authorities were able to expose the convergence of personal betrayal, calculated planning, and the dangerous consequences of manipulation, ultimately leading to the arrest of both Morgan and Steve. Their confessions, painstakingly obtained, not only provided closure to Kevin's family but also underscored the devastating impact that deceit and collusion can have when left unchecked, offering a sobering reminder of the fragility of trust and the profound effects of hidden intentions on the lives of those most intimately connected. In the end, the investigation transformed what had initially seemed like a routine disappearance into a case study of human behavior, manipulation, and the lengths to which some individuals will go to satisfy personal desires. The detailed confessions, corroborated by evidence and painstaking analysis, allowed the truth of Kevin's final days to emerge fully, revealing a story of betrayal that was as calculated as it was tragic. It demonstrated the importance of vigilance, the power of careful investigation, and the undeniable role of digital evidence in modern justice, culminating in the arrest and eventual accountability of Morgan and Steve. whose actions had irrevocably altered the course of Kevin's life and left an enduring impact on all those who knew him. The conclusion of Kevin Mangle's tragic story, though deeply unsettling, serves as a sobering reminder of the profound consequences that arise when trust is betrayed and manipulation goes unchecked. In the courtroom, after years of investigation, confessions, and careful piecing together of events, justice finally took shape. Morgan Wixon, whose calculated actions had orchestrated the downfall of the family she once vowed to protect, was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Her sentence reflected not only the severity of her crimes, but also the deliberate, premeditated nature of her betrayal, a chilling testament to the power of manipulation when wielded without conscience. Steve Chappell, whose involvement was driven in part by infatuation and the influence Morgan exerted over him, received a sentence ranging from 40 to 80 years in state prison. His cooperation with authorities and eventual confession played a key role in unraveling the events. Yet the gravity of his actions and the irreversible impact on Kevin's family remained undeniable. For Kevin's children, the aftermath of this tragedy was an abrupt and jarring transition from the life they had known. Stripped of the presence of their father, who had been the cornerstone of their family, and their mother, whose choices had wrought devastation, they were placed in the care of extended family members. Kevin's mother, Kathleen, and her husband took on the responsibility of raising the children, providing a semblance of stability and continuity in the midst of upheaval. Surrounded by love and support, the children faced the enormous task of navigating grief, confusion, and the absence of the parental figures who had once defined their sense of security. Each day became a careful balancing act of maintaining routines, honoring memories, and rebuilding lives disrupted by acts of calculated malice, a process that would take years of patience, care, and emotional resilience. The broader implications of the case extended far beyond the immediate family, resonating as a cautionary tale about the potential for human relationships to be weaponized by deceit and desire. Kevin's story highlights the fragility of trust, especially when intertwined with ambition, manipulation, and the allure of control over others. Morgan's ability to orchestrate the murder through subtle influence, strategic communication, and exploitation of Steve's affections demonstrates how carefully hidden motives can escalate into catastrophic outcomes. The tragedy underscores the importance of vigilance, awareness, and the recognition that those closest to us are not always acting in our best interest, even when outward appearances suggest otherwise. The legal proceedings that followed further illuminated the meticulous nature of investigative work and the necessity of patience and precision in uncovering truth. From analyzing text messages and phone data to tracking physical movements and interpreting behavioral patterns, authorities demonstrated how modern tools and diligent detective work can reveal the full scope of deception, even when it has been carefully concealed. The confessions, corroborated by tangible evidence, not only brought closure to the case but also ensured accountability, reinforcing the principle that calculated betrayal and violent manipulation will ultimately be met with justice, no matter how intricate the plot. In reflecting on this harrowing tale, viewers are reminded of the broader lessons embedded in Kevin's life and death. Trust, while essential to human connection, carries inherent risk, particularly when wielded in relationships where power dynamics, secrecy, and manipulation exist. The consequences of unchecked deceit are far-reaching, impacting not only immediate victims but also the extended web of family, friends, and community. Kevin's dedication, integrity, and devotion to family stand in stark contrast to the betrayal he suffered, providing a poignant example of the vulnerability that comes with genuine commitment to loved ones. At the same time, the resilience of his surviving family members, particularly his children and their extended guardians, showcases the human capacity for endurance, recovery, and the reconstruction of life even after profound loss. This story, while dark, is also an invitation to examine the ways in which relationships, trust, and influence operate in our own lives. It prompts reflection on the need for attentiveness to warning signs, for open communication, and for fostering support systems that can help mitigate the damage wrought by those who would seek to manipulate or harm. The narrative of Kevin, Morgan, and Steve is, in many, a study of extremes, the best and worst of human behavior, and offers both caution and insight into the complexities of human psychology and interaction. As we close the chapter on this tragic tale, it is impossible not to feel both sorrow for the lives irreversibly altered and admiration for the perseverance of those who sought justice. Kevin's legacy, though shadowed by betrayal, lives on in the lives of his children, the strength of his family, and the lessons imparted to a wider audience about trust, vigilance, and accountability. It is a story that reminds us of the need to cherish integrity, recognize manipulation, and confront wrongdoing with courage and resolve. Thank you so much for watching and staying with us through this gripping story. If you found this account compelling, thought-provoking, or eye-opening, do not forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you can stay updated on more real-life cases, incredible twists, and stories that reveal the hidden complexities of human behavior. Your support helps us continue to bring these stories to light, providing insight, awareness, and reflection for everyone who watches. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more astonishing true crime stories that challenge your expectations and reveal the depth of human intrigue.